is the 7th annual Hingham High School sophomore field trip to the Grand Army of the Republic Memorial Hall.
Well, they have an annual G.A.R Day where they open it up to the high school, the Hingham High School students, to the 10th graders, I believe. And it's an opportunity for them to come in and actually participate and enjoy some of the stories of the people who are actual members here. There's several different groups that meet in this building. I'm a member of the American Legion, and Scott McMillan is the post commander. And we meet monthly in this building, and other groups like the VFW also meet here, and sometimes they have other groups, but the general public doesn't get to come in here very often. But for those people who do get to come in here, there's quite a bit of history from Hingham that's in this building. The different uniforms, the different insignias, the different photographs, and all the different types of memorabilia from different eras going back to the Civil War. It's quite an interesting place to be. So the high school has arranged with the history department for the Hingham students to come up here, and the kids seem to love it. I mean, it's a day out of school, and plus they get to come. It's really fascinating for them. There's a lot of stuff to see and do, and every one of them seemed to really enjoy themselves. Oh, I thought it was great because you had a lot of different speakers. First of all, you had Keith German, who is the town veterans officer, veteran services officer at the town hall. But he also wears two hats. He's also in the Navy. And he just returned from a tour overseas, a very dangerous tour, and he was the moderator today. So, you know, you had an interesting cadre of people here today who served in different capacities. Then you have Scott McMillan, who's actually on the board of directors here, as well as the park ranger for Bear Cove Park, and the post commander for the American Legion Post 120, which meets here. So we had them, we had some of the high school teachers here. I don't know them by name, but they were here with the students. We had different people here who were just visiting. It's an interesting place, and like I said earlier, I just helped out today. I just, you know, and it seems like with about 100 kids. They had 3 different groups of students here today, about 100 apiece. So altogether, about 300 students came through today. And that's something that, you know, took a little bit of coordinating effort, so I was here to help out.
So today I acted as the MC for the event. So the event is in 2 parts. From the beginning, the students walk over from Hingham High School, which is a great commodity for the town, for them to be able to have a free walking field trip. So they walk over from there. It takes them about 10 minutes. It's a double period history class, so they file in pretty quickly, rather quickly. We start off, as we always do here at G.A.R Hall, with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I briefly tell them who I am, what my service was, what I do, and that I would be the MC for today's event. Usually we pass that around, so to the different veterans who want or are capable of doing that position. We were fortunate enough today to have many veterans here. I think the weather played a key part in that, so we had at times up to 8 veterans. They come and go. It's a double period, school period, so the kids are here for 110 minutes, so almost 2 hours. Like I said, there's 2 phases. The first phase is the speaker phase, so we'll introduce different periods of veterans from today. We were fortunate to have Herr Mesmer from the Korean War up into the current conflicts now in Iraq, and even going further to the global war of terrorism, myself just returning last year from a mission to the Horn of Africa. So we had a good cadre of people here to speak, and I give a brief introduction to about them, and then at the second half, or phase 2 of the field trip, we allow the students to get up, look around the hall, take in the history that was so, I guess, freely given to us, and me. I'm very fortunate. I'm one of the trustees for the building, so not only am I in the military, but I'm also an appointed trustee member here to safeguard the building, to safeguard this piece of history that was given to us that I'd like to pass on to them. So for the last 7 years, we've been exposing students at that grade level because it's history appropriate. So they're learning about these things, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, they're learning about all these things. So for them to actually talk to somebody here, great avenue, better than the book. They know the guy. He's a firefighter. Or, hey, I saw you. You're the Bear Cove Park manager. Or, weren't you my postman? You know, so it's a very good connection to a world that they very probably seldom see. So I think it helps bridge the gap, the generation gap, and again, just the history alone in the building, the different faces that you can see on the wall, the different pieces of war memorabilia. I mean, these are things behind me to my left is actually some currency from the Civil War. So somebody from Hingham, some soldier in the Union Army brought that home in his pack, in his pocket. And we were fortunate enough to be able to preserve it, frame it, and show it to for generations to come. So, great treasure.
Well, my particular story was that I did a lot of stuff in the military that's unusual because people don't usually go in for airborne and that kind of stuff. I had a very wide and varied military service. The point I tried is that this was not something I dreamed up. It was something I was forced into. At the time that I went into the military, it was the last thing I ever wanted to do. To be quite honest with you, it was just not something that I wanted to do at all. But, you know, having said that, I had to go. And having gone, you know, I've come to appreciate things now, what it means to be an American, what it means to support our government, what it means to, you know, have the good things in life that we have because other people sacrificed their lives so that we could do this. And it's something that, you know, over time as you mature and you see these type of things in a historical perspective that, you know, we wouldn't have what we have today if it wasn't for the people who went before us. And we're lucky to be in an era where the American Revolution began, you know, right here in the Boston area. And even here in Hingham, you got, you know, General Lincoln. You know, so there's a lot of stuff that goes right back to the Revolutionary War right here in Hingham. So all these people made sacrifices all down through the years, and here we are today. We enjoy the benefits of freedom. We live in the most prosperous country in the world, you know, and that didn't happen automatically. There were people who had to die for that, unfortunately. But the ideals that we represent, the stories of our past, for all the different people who came together for the Declaration of Independence, for our Constitution, these things were monumental in history. They follow like on the French Revolution, the idea of freedom, you know, is something that was new in humanity. And here we are today, we have all these things and we want to pass it on to the kids. These kids in high school pick up some of that today. As they come in, they hear these stories about what people had to pay, what the price was to have what we have today. And I think that's important. These are not stories they're reading out of a book. These are stories that they're hearing right out of the people who did these things. So I was glad to participate.
I mentioned during my monologue, I guess you'd call it, when I'm introducing the building and telling them about the specific facts of the building that you can get from a book, that we have our own trifold that we hand out for people that come here and tour the place. So I gave them some of the facts, but those facts will be lost if we don't expose this generation to the history that's alive and well in Hingham. We want that to perpetuate. So I'm a firm believer in, yes, I'm in the military. I'm proud of my service. I'm proud of being a veteran. It's not why I do it. It's more this building and my connection to Hingham's past and how significantly it is and important and how relevant it is today. If you think about it, why those men came home, and at that time they were only men, who joined the Civil War, left Hingham, came back here. They needed a place to congregate. They needed a place to share their story or tell their story to their comrade. Or what'd you do? Where were you? Well, I was on the Battle of the Potomac. I myself can trace my ancestry back to 1858 here in Hingham from immigrants from Ireland who by 1861 had joined up. So that's a huge thing for me. That's my connection, I guess, to it. And I think that it's smart. It's smart to do business that way. In Hingham, we take such great care of our historic roots. I think it makes us stand head and shoulders above the rest in other communities that are like ours in the South Shore. There are many like this, but I think this is a real treasure to be part of this community. So monthly, as I mentioned, we're an appointed committee. Grand Army of the Republic Memorial Hall. Trustees meet on the first Thursday of every month over at Town Hall, or sometimes in this building, but it's posted with open meeting law. We have an agenda. We go over mostly bills. We don't always get a lot of big crowds like other committees, school committee, planning board, history, etc. But we have our fair share, and so that's one way someone could become involved. They could read the minutes that are posted on the town's website, or they could simply come to the Veteran Service Office at Town Hall on the second floor, where I work my regular full-time job as the Director of Veteran Services, and it would be easy enough to schedule a tour and for anyone who is interested in coming in. We do hope in the future, as our budget allows, to and hopefully utilize some of what they call the Valor Act, which is a Veterans Tax Work-Off program. So that would be free labor for the town in reduction of someone's property tax. So someone who's elderly who can't make ends meet could volunteer here, and that's my goal, is to have this open maybe a few days a week, different times, and allow this to be one of the visited museums in Hingham, such as the Old Ordinary, Old Ship Church, and Old Derby when that reopens as well. Veterans from all generations, they just want to hear their story told, and they just simply want to be, just when you see them, if you thank them, it means the world. It so seldom happens. You would think it happens every day, but it really doesn't. So if you see a veteran, or he's your neighbor, or he's wearing that hat on Memorial Day or Veterans Day, and that's the only time you see him, you should probably thank him. I think that's my biggest message, is to get that out, that when I greet somebody in my office at Town Hall, the first thing I do is thank them for their service.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to G.A.R Hall. That's Grand Army of the Republic Memorial Hall. And I'm going to start with how we always start whenever we, the veterans, gather here, and that's with our Pledge of Allegiance. So if you will please stand and join me. Detail, left hand, salute, and salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. Thank you. Please take your seats. Again, I'd like to thank you, the students of Hingham High School, the faculty, department head, principal, and superintendent for allowing this great curriculum, now in its 7th year, to continue here at the Hall. My name is Senior Chief Petty Officer Keith German. I'm assigned to the Naval Expeditionary Combat Command, Group 2 of the 7th Naval Construction Regiment, and I will be your MC for today's event. The event will be broken up into 2 parts. The first part, you will hear firsthand information from veterans that served from Hingham. They'll tell you about their experiences, what led them to the service that they chose, and stories that they may find near and dear to their heart. The second part, we will allow you to visit with these veterans, to walk around the hall and look at the exhibits. So everything that you see in this hall is museum quality. So that when you see a flag or a banner that's in a frame on the wall, that was actually held by some person or a citizen of Hingham in that time period. So some of this stuff is from the 1800s, and some of it's all the way new to now. So when you're looking at it, it's real. If it's a facsimile, it'll say it's a facsimile. But for the most part, everything that's in this hall is real, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before I start, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I enlisted in the United States Navy Seabees right after Hingham High School. I graduated in June of 1985. I've served in combat actions and humanitarian relief efforts around the globe. I have 3 children that have gone to those schools as well. Nicholas and Callie, both graduates, and JT, who's currently in your class, is a sophomore. With the Navy Seabees, I have been to the following countries: Portugal, Spain, Italy, Syria, Kuwait, Iraq, Egypt, Germany, Kenya, Somalia, Liberia, and Djibouti. CB means Construction Battalion, so it's an acronym. So what we do is we provide advanced base construction for all the other branches of the military. Specifically, we work with Navy SEALs. We usually deploy with them as what they call a soft platoon. We go out, we set up their camp. Once we set that camp up, we defend it. They go out and do their thing. They go out and collect insurgents, or we've seen American Sniper, right? Those are those guys, all right? So we usually are there to facilitate them doing the good works that they do around the globe. So a little bit about the hall. As I mentioned, we refer to it as G.A.R Hall or G.A.R Hall, but it means the Grand Army of the Republic. It was founded in 1866 by Benjamin Stevenson in Decatur, Illinois, with a purpose to perpetuate the patriotic memories of the struggle to preserve the Union and to serve as a fraternal organization composed of veterans of the Union Army who had served during the Civil War. Specifically, Hingham's G.A.R. In 1869, Edward Humphrey Post was formed. And it was organized and named after that Hingham man who was the first person to die in the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. Colonel Hawks Ferring was the post's first commander here in Hingham. And in 1888, Hingham's Grand Army of the Republic Memorial Hall was completed and dedicated as a meeting place for veterans and became a major post-war social organizational structure. So recently, I know you had annual town hall at Hingham High School. So they had all the seats in the gym, correct? So this used to be that meeting place. This was the place where people from Hingham congregated to have town meeting, to vote, to do those things that we do all over now because we're so much bigger and have grown. But this building was a focal point of this town. The building was designed by a 22-year-old architect named Henry Merritt, the son of a Hingham blacksmith. In addition to being a meeting place for veterans, the hall has served many functions. In 1912, before the building of Loring Hall, silent picture shows were shown in this location. In the 1930s, the G.A.R Hall was dissolved by the last two surviving members of the Civil War. Years later, the building, now known as the Major Edward B. Cole American Legion Post 120, was named for a Hingham resident, a U.S. Marine who served during World War I. Today's hall is used by veterans for meetings, special events such as this, Memorial and Veteran Day activities, and also houses historic and wartime memorabilia that serves to honor, recognize, and remember those men and women from Hingham who served and the heritage of our local national military history. So as I mentioned, we were now going to bring up several different speakers, these men and women from Hingham and from around the area, serve. They're going to tell you their story, and I'm happy to introduce them. So we're going to start first with Jessica Pedraza. She was a specialist in the United States Army, Massachusetts Army National Guard, 1058 Transportation Company. So that's on Central Street, right down the street from here. So Jessica, if I could get you to come up.
How are you all doing? You guys gotta learn some chivalry. I see some ladies sitting on the floor saying, I was raised with respect when the guys would give their seats to the women. That's why. I'm Specialist Jessica Pedraza. I graduated Rockland High School 2008. I was the first and only female varsity football player when I was in school. I'm also like the only female uniform that's up here, you can tell. Around my junior years when I started having to face the decisions as to what I was going to do after high school, I was accepted to 6 colleges, one of them being Norwich University, and just randomly out of the blue, I put college on hold and I decided to join the Army. I joined February 22nd, 2008, after basic training, which was in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and after my job training in Fort Lee, Virginia, I was attached to the 1058 transportation company down the street. We deployed in January 8th, 2010 to Iraq, and what made my deployment a little different is I deployed with my mom. So it's two people in one family, and mom and daughter. I mean, you don't really hear that, do you? We both deployed as truck drivers. And when I say truck drivers, not the trucks that you see like parked in the unit there. I drove a 48-wheeled vehicle that hauled tanks. That's what I did. That was my job when I was overseas. So as small as I am, to give you a little gist of what it looked like, I had to tippy-toe to get the door unlocked, and the door would swing right over my head. So that's how big the truck is. You didn't want to be in front of that when I was driving. So to give you a feel of how it was being in Iraq, on a good day it was 135 degrees. So you add 135 degrees to about 80 pounds of gear, and driving in a truck for about 13 hours on a week to 3 week long mission. That's what I did for an entire year. And being deployed with my mom, you know, people would think that I got to see her all the time. There was months that went by that I didn't get to see her. And it was extremely nerve-wracking, you know. She drove on the same streets that I did, and those streets weren't pretty streets, you know. They didn't want us there. We were shot at, we were mortared. We had IEDs and V-beds, which are pretty much cars filled with explosives that they would try to come up on you. And you know, they even got creative and started using dogs to kind of blow us up. But needless to say, I came home Christmas Eve of 2010. Hingham was probably the best welcome home committee. I'll say that. You guys, there's people waiting out there, and it was freezing cold. They were waiting out there for 2 hours just to even see, you know, our buses passing. I was thankful for that, because when these Vietnam vets come up here and they talk, they didn't get a welcome home. So, currently, I'm employed as an EMT. I just took my civil service exam to become a firefighter, hopefully get picked up by next year. And I'm going to school full-time at Massasoit, working on a social science degree in hopes of being a counselor for returning veterans. I'm not much older than you guys. You know, I deployed when I was 19. I'm 25 now, so I know it's a big difference in, you know, these guys who, they have the appearance that people would put with a veteran, you know, an older gentleman. And just want to put it out there, you know, there's women that can do the same jobs, you know, and I'll challenge any guy who wants to do a driving test. But yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, I mean, I'll be here for a short time, but I actually have class after this, so if you want to ask anything, you can do it like right now if you want. Any questions?
Did you and your mom both get to come home at the same time?
We did. It was weird because at first going over, they kept us separate in different planes for safety reasons, you know. God forbid anything were to happen, that's two people in one family, and they didn't want to have that. So we fought for them to let us come home together, and they did. So, anyone else? All right.
Great job. Thank you, Jessica. It's my pleasure now to bring up Mr. Steve Gill. Steve has a remarkable story that I hope he will share with you. Some of that. He started out as a PSC, as most of us do, as the lowest enlisted rank, and he rose to the level of lieutenant commander before he departed 20 years of faithful service. He served in both the U.S. Army and the U.S. Navy from 1973 to 1993. Stephen Gill.
Thank you. They asked me to keep my remarks brief, so thank you very much. I'm glad to see all the Hingham High School students here today. I hope you're enjoying yourself. How's it going so far? Awake? You guys feeling good? All right, great. Well, everything went back far. Some of that stuff's a little bit too far, so I'll start right with my military service. What happened was, and you may not remember this, but during the Vietnam War, there was a thing called the draft. And a lot of people, you see all these uniforms here, not everybody really wanted to go into the service, if you catch my drift. There was people being sent to war, they were dying. These are kids I knew from high school, I'm reading about them in the paper. I did not want to go, to be honest with you. And it's just one of those things that they wanted me more than I wanted them. Okay. So it ended up, I had a choice to make. Either they took me and sent me where they wanted me to go, or I made a choice and I joined. So I made the choice and joined, and I made a selection, and that was to go with the 10th Special Forces Group out of Fort Devens, Mass. So as a result of that, I came into the service, went to basic training, and on the first day, some guy tried to commit suicide. The only problem was he jumped out the second floor window and they go too far, broke a leg. And that was my first day in the service. And I never thought I was going to make it through basic training. Originally it was 8 weeks, but I was stationed at Fort Dix, and every 5 minutes there was a plane flying overhead. It was going to Vietnam. And so they shortened my class to 6 weeks because they really need more people to go. And fortunately, I didn't have to go. In any event, from there I went to Com Center Specialist School in Fort Worth, Georgia. And there, I was doing my class one day, and two guys came in suits, which is never a good thing when you're in the military. They took me in the back room with 2 other guys, and they said, look, you did so good on your test, we're going to make an offer that you can't refuse. We got 4 different assignments you could take. If you choose, the first one was to work at the White House Communications Center. Could have gone to any embassy in the world that I chose. I could have gone to The Hague in the Netherlands, or I could keep my own assignment. So I stayed at my own assignment. So I ended up going to Fort Devens. They sent me down to Fort Benning, Georgia, where I went to jump school. And anybody know what airborne school is all about? You go for 3 weeks of training, and then first week you're out doing your running and exercises. Second week you're up there in the towers and you're doing these practice jumps. And the third week you go in a plane, you do 5 jumps. So you're out of usually a C-130 aircraft. And when you're jumping out of an aircraft like a C-130, the wind is blowing so hard, you have to get to the side of the plane and actually push yourself out to get out so you don't slam against the side of the plane as you go out. And you're attached to a static line, so as you're waiting for the chute to open, you got a great view, and finally the chute opens and everything's nice. Well, after I left the jump school, I had the opportunity to jump out of different aircraft. My favorite was the helicopter, because we used to be in the UH-1 helicopter and the door would be open. You actually sat on the side with your feet on the skids, and you would get up to altitude, and you wouldn't jump, you would just fall over the side, and then the only problem was it took longer for the chute to open. So anyway, what happened was eventually the chute opened, and again, we would have a nice time. But then at times we had to do night jumps, and I had to do it full gear. We had to have a rucksack on our front, our rifle strapped to our side, and it was nighttime. So we went through all kinds of different exercises. I did get to go to England for 3 months. I spent some time there, it was great, and I got to go to London. And my biggest thrill was go to Liverpool. So that was nice. So after I did my time in the Army, as I was getting ready to get out, I was doing crypto in the service, which is basically you take different messages and you encrypt them, which today is very popular if you read about it all the time, but back then it was pretty specialized. And the NSA tried to recruit me when I got out. I said, no, I'm going to finish my last 2 years of college. So at UMass, and at the time, I was living down in Hingham at World's End. At the end, there's some cottages. So I was at ROTC at Northeastern University. And when I graduated college, I got a commission in the U.S. Army as a second lieutenant. So they sent me to the Corps of Engineer School at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And there I did my time, and then they sent me to Korea. Unfortunately, Herm's already got this map here. When I was stationed in Korea, I was on a brigade staff for a general. His name was Victor Hugo. Anybody ever hear of Victor Hugo? His grandfather wrote the play Les Miserables. Well, anyway, he used to let me use his helicopter, because I was responsible for all of this area of South Korea, all the missile defense sites in South Korea. I was working for a four-star general, General Vesey, out of the headquarters in Seoul, and I was doing a site hardening project for all the missile sites. And then right along here's the DMZ, so we used to have to fly along the DMZ, and a lot of times these guys were right out of flight school. If we had strayed over the line, we would have been shot down, but thank God that never happened. So when I got out of the Army, again this time, I decided to switch over to the Navy. Because of my background, I was able to pick up a commission in the Naval Intelligence Service. And there I did, I can't really talk about too much about what I did there. Anyway, well, one assignment I had, which was pretty nice, I did do an assignment at the Pentagon for the Chief of Naval Operations. It was investigating the Walker spy scandal. There was a family here from Massachusetts, and they were involved in espionage with the submarine fleet, and they had 3 members of the family in different submarines, so they were putting this together and giving it to the Russians at the time. So I was involved in that investigation, and then later on, I ended up getting out of the Army, out of the Navy, and then I ended up going to law school. So I got out in 93, I graduated from law school in 96, I practiced law here in Massachusetts, and that's about it. If I have any questions, all righty.
Thank you. Our next speaker also has some secret background to him as well. U.S. Navy Security Group Lieutenant John Asher, who served during the Vietnam era from 1969 to 1972. John is the current chairman of the Hingham Veterans Council and the former chairman of the Hingham Advisory Committee. John Asher.
Thank you, Keith. Good afternoon, everybody. As Keith said, my name is John Asher. I was a cryptologic officer in the U.S. Naval Security Group, originally stationed at a secret base in Japan, and then subsequently at the National Security Agency. So I actually went. I had a top secret special compartmented intelligence clearance. So what we'll be discussing today, I can guarantee you, is unclassified. But I thought it would be interesting to conduct a thought experiment. So, to the exclusion of the political campaigns that are ongoing right now, we'll elect you as a group President of the United States. So, congratulations, your paycheck is now $400,000 a year. But along with that goes the responsibility of being the Commander-in-Chief of about 1.4 million men and women who serve in the United States Armed Forces. And you sit in a daily intelligence briefing and basically make very important decisions about the deployment of those armed forces. I worked at the White House for several years after I got out of the Navy, and I can tell you that those decisions are life and death decisions, literally. So get set for your first daily intelligence briefing with your National Security Advisor. You may be joined by the Secretary of Defense, possibly by the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and you will meet in the Situation Room, which is underground under the White House and is a secure facility. So today, what you're going to be asked to make decisions about are, for example, the ISIS training bases that are in the Middle East, Syria, and Iraq particularly, and the fact that those bases are being used to train and arm jihadis that are being exfiltrated back into Western Europe, possibly even the United States. North Korea just launched, purportedly, a ballistic missile from a submarine. They are a nuclear state. And so you're going to be asked to make some decisions about what do we need to know and do to protect our allies, South Korea, Japan, and possibly even the threat to the west coast of the United States. China is now building military bases on what were formerly atolls in the South China Sea, and is also looking to build a base in Djibouti, where Senior Chief German is just back from, because they want to project power into the Middle East and Southeast Asia. And finally, as you probably read in the paper, Russia conducted simulated air attacks on a U.S. Navy destroyer in the Baltic Sea just a couple of weeks ago from their very heavily armed base in Kaliningrad. You're going to be asked to make some decisions about that, and what are you going to need? You're going to need intelligence. So what is intelligence? Well, intelligence, very simply, is the foreknowledge of the capabilities and intentions of typically an opponent, but not always. We also conduct intelligence gathering with some of our allies, and they do the same with us, to us. Collection of intelligence these days occurs through a variety of what are called platforms: satellites, aircraft, ships, submarines, land bases, and of course the internet. Back when I was in 69, 72, satellite technology was not what it is today, highly, highly secure, and the internet really didn't exist the way you all understand it and use it. We used what was called ARPANET, ARPA standing for Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is really the foundation of the internet that we all use today. It was a multi-node communication network that connected governmental entities like the National Security Agency with large universities that were doing classified research for the government. So the collection is occurring of that intelligence. What are they collecting? They're collecting basically electronic communications, signals intelligence, so radar signatures, voice communications, probably all of which are encrypted. That intelligence finds its way to the National Security Agency at Fort Meade, Maryland, where it is aggregated, where communications that are encrypted are attempted to be broken, decoded, decrypted, assembled and analyzed, and then actually published. And so your daily intelligence briefing is really a summary of intelligence coming from a lot of sources, not the least of which what I just described, and that the National Security Agency plays a large role in producing. Why do you spend your precious time as President of the United States in a daily intelligence briefing? I'd say there's two reasons. One, intelligence can prevent wars, and you've studied or will shortly study the Cold War, which was never really a shooting war in the sense that you would think of war, but was a standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union, each of whom had enough intelligence about the other to realize that if we ever launched the nuclear weapons that we each had in the thousands, that we would not only destroy each other, we'd probably destroy the planet. Secondly, the knowledge that when combat is unavoidable, that the side that has the better intelligence will win more often, will prevail. So I would leave you with one thought. We all enjoy a beautiful town and a very nice lifestyle here in the United States. That is due, in my opinion, in large part to the ongoing efforts of thousands of men and women every day who, in an unseen and I would say largely unheralded fashion, are gathering that intelligence that gives our president and others the foreknowledge of the capabilities and intentions of people and groups whose desire is to harm us and to change our way of life. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions after the speaking portion of this session is done. I would wish you good luck in your futures and take advantage of them. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And now I'd like to call, to give their story, is Mr. Dave Sargent. Dave, a Hingham resident, was a first lieutenant, still is to me, in the U.S. Army 5th Division Infantry Mechanical, Vietnam, 1968 to 69. We're going to hear a little bit about Dave and what he's experienced.
Thank you, Chief. I don't want to get out of here without once again noting Keith German's recent promotion to Senior Chief Petty Officer of the United States Army, to be officially pinned, I'll call it, this weekend in Alabama. The second highest rank in the United States Navy, if you haven't heard this from JT already. So a round of applause for Keith German, Veteran of the Year. I've noted that the girls are still sitting on the floor, and I think that's not a bad indication of what's being taught. Anyway, another thing is, when you hear that we're drafting individuals to go in the services, if these individuals are jumping out of perfectly safe airplanes, this country is in trouble. Where is that jumper? There he is. All right, my quick experience. While in college, I was a part of the ROTC program. That is a program where you can graduate from college with an officer's commission, which I did, 1967. 12 months or so after that, I was on ground in Vietnam as a platoon leader, combat platoon leader, which was command of 44 individuals. Pretty short span from fraternity parties to eating sea rations somewhere in the jungle. But at any rate, we went through intensive training before we got there. And the 44 guys that I trained with, I made sure as their commander that I knew as much about each of them as I possibly could, even to the name of their wives, if married, the names of their children, if they had them. Everything we could learn about each other we did, so that when we were in a tight situation, we basically would know how each of us would respond. And that's teamwork. That's what you do in school and your sports teams. And that's what you do in the military if you want to succeed. My function as a platoon leader really is not to be one of the individuals who engages the enemy, but the individual who commands the unit and puts those pieces together so that they're in the right place to engage the enemy. I had that command for 6 months and got off the field in Vietnam, which was the policy to rotate officers out of the field after a certain period of time. I then took the position of what is called a liaison officer between our higher headquarters and my unit. And I would attend a briefing in the morning at that headquarters, then drive a Jeep down a dusty road to my headquarters and brief my commander. I did that for a period of time, and up to when we became engaged with a significantly large North Vietnamese force, during which time the captain, who had the position of what, if I haven't before, it's Air Operations Officer. The responsibility for that position is to coordinate all air support for a unit of 600 people. That would be close air support, jets, and any helicopter support that may be required. When that fellow was wounded, the battalion commander called me back and said, you're now the S3 Air. The sidelight of that is not too bad, because on top of combat pay, you're getting flight pay. So, whatever. I took over that mission, and we were in the area of the engagement, and at the time, nobody from any unit, any service would land on the LZ where our unit was engaged with the enemy. It's called a hot LZ. And the policy was no helicopter ever was to land on a hot LZ. We got the call from the ground, and the pilot listened to the fellow down on the ground, as did I, and said, we've had guys down here that have been dead for 2 or 3 days, and that we've just got to get them out of here, plus some wounded. And he talked us into it and how to approach the unit, which was, hear me back there? It was kind of interesting because we took that helicopter, we flew it into the DMZ, which separated North Vietnam and South Vietnam, and then took a left turn, describe it, and flew right over the heads of the North Vietnamese in order to land on this LZ to get these people out. We didn't really land, the helicopter hovered, I jumped out, then the rest is history. But it was written up that I did that thing 3 times, I only remember it once, but this is what happens in combat. Combat is teamwork, and if you don't have teamwork as you learn in school, you're not going to succeed. I left Vietnam and I came home to a country which was broken. And when we came back, we were soldiers who were termed baby killers, spat upon. I had a college roommate who was assigned to the Pentagon at the time. When he went to work one morning, there was protesters on the steps of the Pentagon who proceeded to throw pig's blood on him and several of his associates going to work. You could buy this stuff at a slaughterhouse for something like $20 a gallon, I guess. But that's what happened to him. My other schoolmate came home from Vietnam, walked through Logan Airport. The fellow actually lives in Hingham now. Walked through Logan Airport as a returning pilot, and a schoolmate saw him and came up to say hi to him, and shook his hand with an inverted cigarette. Painful. Welcome home. I want to take you now to better than 40 years after Vietnam, having left it. One night, sitting at my desk in my home, the phone rings about 9 o'clock at night. I see the name on the caller ID, and I kind of recall it. But the conversation went through kind of a test thing. He asked me if my name was what it is. And then he asked me if I was in the Army. Then he asked me if I was in Vietnam. And then he said, this is Doc LaRue. Doc LaRue was my platoon medic. I hadn't laid eyes on him or spoken to him in 40 plus years. As I said to an earlier class, if an enlisted man is contacting his platoon leader after 42 years, it's usually for a nefarious reason. But this turned out to be really great. Following that, my then 18-year-old machine gunner got in touch with me, as did my radio telephone operator, which ended up to be a reunion in Washington, D.C. 3 years ago. We now continue that this summer. We're meeting in Portland, Oregon. I can't tell you the feeling it is when you meet 40 plus years after you served in combat with 3 guys you haven't talked to or laid eyes on in that period of time. It's an incredible feeling. As a side note to that, one of the evenings there, my radio telephone operator, whose wife had arranged a bus tour for us that night in the rain, and that's what wives do. They get you out of the hotel and take on these rides so you don't hang around the bar, I guess. But we got to the wall, and I don't know, many of you people been to the Vietnam Wall? Nobody? It's quite a location. There are more people who go by the Vietnam Wall in a year's time, I'm told, I think I'm correct on this, to go through Disney World. But anyway, this fellow and I, and his wife, were dropped off at the wall with about 10 other people who were on that bus, who learned while we were going over there that he and I were Vietnam veterans. and happened to learn the name of one of the fellows who was killed in our platoon. He took us to the wall, we walked to where that tablet was, where the fellow's name is, and then started asking us questions. My radio telephone operator and I just kind of gave a very low-key conversation to the crowd. Afterwards, an elderly lady came up to us with, she wanted to say that what she had just heard brought her granddaughter to tears. That was quite something to hear. Let me leave you with this, that I'm proud to have served in the Armed Forces of the United States. I'm proud to have worn the uniform. I recall fondly standing in formation and listening to the national anthem, and I got to tell you, that gets me every time I hear it. I'm proud that I can be called a veteran and be associated with the veterans that are here with me, and the veterans that I have met in other groups in the town. I'm going to leave it at that. I wish you all great success in the future, and God bless you all. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dave. Our next speaker will be Mr. Art Milmore. Art Milmore served as a hospital corpsman in the United States Navy's 2nd and 6th Fleets, Vietnam era, from 1964 to 1967. Art?
When I was 18, I tried to beat the choice so I could do it myself. So I went in the U.S. Navy at age 17, had to have parental permission in March of the junior year in high school. And on that summer, I had to report to Davisville, Rhode Island, the CB base, for 2 weeks of basic training. In reserves, you had to do everything in a compressed thing and learn it even faster. And then at the end of the 2 weeks in basic training, they put you through a lot, physically and so forth. And I was this high, 6'2", when I weighed 120 pounds. The same physique as olive oil. No matter how much weights I lose, I tried lifting, I still never got any muscles. So the Navy was a better fit for me than the Army or the Marines. But sometimes things you learn in school help you later. And the company commander said to me, he says, "How come you can march so perfectly and everybody else is all left feet?" I said, "I've been in marching bands. I learned 3 instruments since I was 11. Guess what he said to me? He said, "You're now a squad leader." I had it made in boot camp. The day after we get back, we graduated on a Saturday. Sunday afternoon, I had to be in Boston to report aboard the USS Hazelwood, a Fletcher-class destroyer that had been hit by 2 kamikazes and almost sunk during the Battle of Okinawa. And it was all fixed up and great shape. And I had been in boats since 10, and when I was out there, I got so seasick. I turned the same color as Kermit the Frog, and my division officer comes up to me and says, "How come, it says in your records you've been in boats since you were 10. He says, "How come you're seasick?" I says, "I'm a harbor sailor, sir, not an ocean sailor." There's a huge difference between the two. So they gave me one of the heavier jobs on ship. We fired the 5-inch guns on 2 different days, and they made me the projectile man. And the projectile weighed almost half as much as I did. And the projectile weighs, that's a live one, it weighs 55 pounds, and they say don't drop it on your toe. So after about an hour and a half of loading that thing, your arms are starting to get like rubber, but your muscles are starting to bulge out like you never saw before, as well as your shoulders. And they rotated us through each position, and we had no ear protection back then. It was fire in the hold and 2 hands over 2 ears. That was it. So we went to, the destroyer, we left Boston, we went to Bermuda, and then to Block Island, and then to New York City for the World's Fair in 1964, and it was quite a good thing. So so I went back to school at the end of it, and when I was in the senior year, I was telling the guys about it, and nobody would believe me. So I said, "Fine, do what you want." And so the next day, I brought in the pictures and I said, you should have seen their faces. So when you do things that are way out of the ordinary, take insurance pictures because nobody will believe you until they see the pictures. And I do a lot of things like that. So in the 2 days after graduation in '65, I had to report to Newport, Rhode Island, where I went on the USS Newman K. Perry, my second destroyer, and we left for the Mediterranean. 2 days after that, we stopped at the Azores on the way over, and then into the Mediterranean. Well, during that late July, we were in a collision with the aircraft carrier Shangri-La at 2 o'clock in the morning off of Sardinia. The whole ship went right over on its side. I tumbled out of my bunk at 2 in the morning and 15 guys landed on top of me. And we were all up on deck in 15 seconds flat. I had never been up a ladder or of any type that fast in my entire life. And you're half asleep and you look up and the carrier's right next to us, all these red lights going on, all these alarms going on, and I was still half asleep after doing a 20-hour day loading food, stores, and ammunition. And I was up for another 73 hours getting the 2 guys that were hurt out of the crushed bow. The whole thing was bent 90 degrees to the right, and we had to spend 3 days at 3 knots going back to Naples. And when we got back into Naples, my parents hadn't heard about it. They probably read a story in the paper but didn't look at it too much, and we looked up, 29 helicopters, all taking pictures. Were right in the middle. And so they said when we had a chance to go ashore, they said, go to the NATO base at Medjugorje. It's right next to Naples, to the west, and call your parents on the Navy and tell them in your own words that you're all right. So we were, and we had to spend 2.5 months in dry dock in Naples, getting an entire new bow put on and working with the Italian Yardbirds. And by that time, before that time, they found out I was the only one on ship that could stand the sight of blood without getting sick. That was my big calling to medicine, so that it may be a hospital corpsman striker. But in the accident, it was a very, very tough thing to get through. And I don't even remember after the 73 hours we were up getting it back to my bunk. I must have been carried back because the guy said I slept for 28 hours solid. And when I woke up, I see, I was only a seaman, I see chief and first and second class petty officers tippy-toeing by my bunk, and I wake up and say, what the heck's everybody tiptoeing for? They said, didn't you see the sign over your bunk? I said, no. They said, turn around. They said, I turned around, and there was a sign hanging from the bunk above mine, not to be awakened under any circumstances, signed executive officer. Then they had to give me the bad news that the guy we got out alive that was hurt very, very bad died in the OR in the carrier. So when they play the naval hymn for lost shipmates, it tends to hit you a little hard, but you survive it and you move on. No matter how tough life can get, you have to be a little bit tougher. And when you go in the service, they give you the right training to stay alive, and you would normally be getting killed in this situation. They teach you how to stay alive and to keep going. And that's the mental toughness that you have to get when you do it. So I went on to college at Northeastern University and became a X-ray and an ultrasound technician at Quincy Hospital for 25 years. But after that, at age 40, I was starting to get burnt out. So I had also learned a second career. My next door neighbor was a boat builder when I grew up with him in North Weymouth. And we built boats from the keel up. So you learned how to do woodworking, electrical, plumbing, and mechanics all at the same time. I helped change an engine at 12 years old before I ever changed a spark plug, so I learned it backwards. But if you don't like the job you're doing, you can always go to night school. You have to get yourself out from behind the boob tube a couple of nights a week. Go to night school and learn to do something else. So I wanted to be a much better mechanic so I could work at it in the future. So I went to night school 4 years, and I took the test and became a mechanic for the U.S. Postal Service in Boston for 26 and a half years, and I retired at 67 3 years ago because the knees were shot, the shoulders ripped, and you can only go like that for so long. So then the second time I went to night school, I learned to be a photographer. And I had a couple of front pages in the Quincy Ledger, and I worked with Associated Press on the last 3 America's Cups down in Newport. And the third thing, I'm going to school now at 70 years old, and I'm learning how to do stand-up comedy. And I've had 2 of the top comedians in New England, Christine Hurley, who's a top female comedian. She goes to Las Vegas 3 times a year. I just saw her Saturday night down in Hull, and Steve Sweeney, who was one of the top male comedians, and 2 or 3 others. So I'm still going to a night school to learn something how to do. It's a lot of fun. I've done 23 of them. Everybody's laughed and nobody's thrown any food. So far, so good. So thank you all, and try to learn all the common sense you can, because you're going to need it by the ton to get through life, and you wear your seatbelts all the time, and so you can stay alive long enough to play with your grandchildren, because that's one of the most beautiful and fun things you can live to do. Okay, so you're all good people. You have a fantastic school system, and sometimes right now you may not appreciate all of your teachers, but you look back at it 30 years down the line, you'll appreciate them 100 times better than you ever did before. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, Art. It's now my pleasure to bring up Mr. Donald Lincoln. Donald Lincoln served as a fire controlman, 2nd class petty officer in the United States Navy 6th Fleet. He served during the Cold War, as was mentioned earlier. 1956 to 1960, he's also a retired Hingham firefighter with a long line of service to this community. Don Lincoln.
Good afternoon. Keith told you I served as a fire controlman in the Navy on destroyers, and aboard a destroyer, a fire controlman handles the weapon systems, fires the guns, torpedoes, whatever there is. With the Hingham Fire Department, we put fires out. And I did graduate from Hingham High School. Went into the Navy in 1956, went to boot camp, spent the rest of the year in school at Great Lakes for electronics. Went aboard ship, and my first cruise lasted, supposed to be a 6-month cruise, and it lasted about 10 months. We went to take the midshipmen from Annapolis on their summer cruise, which ended in Naples, with them going ashore, and our ship continuing on to Beirut to put the first Marines ashore in Beirut, 1958, in their summer of July. From Beirut, we went to Quemoy and Matsu, which are 2 islands off the coast of China, where the Chinese were shelling King Kai-shek from Formosa. He had his men on that island, and they still hold those 2 islands. In '59, I had the most pleasurable cruise I had in the Navy. We opened the St. Lawrence Seaway, and we spent the whole summer in the 5 Great Lakes. And I just want to say thank you. I enjoyed my military career. It helped me in my life afterwards, going to Northeastern. I have a couple of degrees in electronics. And with that, I thank you, and I wish you the best.
Thanks, Don. Our final speaker today will be Herm Mesmer. Herm served as a corporal in the United States Army 25th Infantry Division, Korea, 1952 to 1953. Herm is an avid runner, and for those of you who haven't seen him in the 4th of July road race, it's probably because he was training for his 3rd Boston Marathon. He's 86 years old. So Hingham resident, Herm Mesmer.
Good afternoon, boys and girls. Thanks for coming, as if you had any choice. Glad to have you, and I hope you'll get something out of what you're hearing and seeing today. I hope I can give you a couple ideas of things that affected me when I was a kid your age, sitting where you are. I graduated Albany High, 1948. Hard to believe, that's ancient. And now I've got 2 grandsons in this graduating, not just graduating class, but in high school this year, and other grandkids around. And I never miss an opportunity to tell them about some of the things that the Korean War meant to me and what it taught me. And I'd like to impart some of that to you. I know you can't read this, don't worry about it. I just want you to see some general areas. This is the north, this is China. This is the South China Sea down here. This is Korea, a narrow strip of land about 60 to 100 miles in width. And the war lasted 3 years, the Korean War. Started in 1950 with the invasion of the North Koreans across the 38 parallel to South Korea. The war broke down that first year with that massive drive down. All the South Korean forces were in this small perimeter called Taeju down here. And at that time, a famous general in our services, General Douglas MacArthur, you've probably heard of, he's famous. He organized a pincer movement and an invasion into Incheon this way and cut these troops off. And then the war took a turn, the second year going this way until they got to China. MacArthur wanted to bomb China, he wanted to get it over with, and was subsequently removed from office. And then the third year involved battles of what they call the Battle of the Hills. And this is when I went there. I was there for the last year of the war. And although it wasn't a lot of action this way, it was bloody action this way. Okay, it was take a hill at night, give it back the next night. Take the hill again, give it back. And it caused a lot of casualties. We were in this line of action, and the division that I was in would move in and out depending on what the circumstances were, and cause, all kinds of harassment. I consider myself a very lucky guy for all the close calls I had, accidentally or whatever, okay? That's what happens when you're in your service in that kind of a conflict. You never know what's going to happen. So I was glad to go home. And some of the things I wanted to tell you about, I was in communications, supplying services from a regimental headquarters to a division headquarters. So they were the top, okay? And the way we did it was VHF. At that time was high technology. I felt so good. I was in high school. I was a high school guy, okay? I drove a truck, sold root beer. I had a variety of jobs before I got into the service and got technically trained. Then, when the supplies would come in that way, and the communications were going in and out, we had to keep those radio stations going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we had these little units, like a grass lawnmower engine, only a little bigger. We had 4 of them lined up, and they would run for 4 hours, and every 4 hours you go out and start another one, and then fill the gas on that one and keep it going. So we stayed on the air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And all the communication telephones lines from the regimental headquarters would come up by wire to our truck, and we hook them up and put them on VHF frequency modulated frequencies and transmit the information by radio. It was high-tech stuff back then. And even though that was high-tech, some of the things we endured was really low-tech. All right? The food, we most of the time had C rations. If we were lucky enough to get away to a field kitchen, you took a mess kit, which you will see up here, some mess kits. And let me tell you, baby, they were sacred, having a mess kit. You took care of that thing. Because that could mean the difference between eating off the ground and eating off the plate. And the silverware that went with it. The C rations came in a variety of flavors. I wish I had some samples. One of my favorites was corned beef hash, ham and lima beans, spaghetti meatballs. There was also a package would come in with all kinds of things, 2 little tools you might need, like salt and pepper, and a 4-pack of cigarettes. So we had help with smoking and cocoa and coffee and things like that. So that was the food. And like I said, any chance you got to get to a field kitchen, well, you took advantage of it. You ran down there and loaded up. Showers, every 4 to 6 weeks was shower time. And at the same time, you get a change of uniform. You turn in your old uniform, and they give you a freshly washed uniform for whoever, but it was your size, and off you went. And that was the routine for that. During the winters were hell. We got the Manchurian winds came down here. This is the 38th parallel. What parallel are we up here? 42? So we're colder than it was there, theoretically. But this wind chill that came down through here really was a tough winter. And outdoor facilities, our toilets were old ammunition cases with holes cut in it, and a canvas thrown over the top if you were lucky to have a canvas. And that was a day-to-day situation. Also at this time, I was getting ready to go back. The war ended. It got boring as hell up there on a hilltop. The war was over. There was a so-called truce. That so-called truce is still going on today. You read the papers. It's still not a safe place. Then I came home on a troop ship, the same kind of troop ship I went. And, we didn't have email, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have any of the computerized world. And I remember I did call home once when I got a chance. I got sent back to a rest area, and there was telephone services allowed. So mail was very much appreciated. Let me tell you, you look forward to that mail call when that stuff came in, looking for especially something to eat. Then when I came back on a troop ship, and the troop ships were not luxury liners, okay? People were seasick. It was awful. We were all in a big compartment, and the bunks were four high, okay? So what they would do is everybody would be told to get up out of bed. They'd push the bunks up and they'd latch them up so it would create big aisleways so you could get around. And then some people who were so sick would come down and say, lay down, and they'd push that thing up and lock it. And they'd lay it all day. They were so seasick. So coming home, one of my biggest thrills was arriving in San Francisco Bay and going under the Golden Gate Bridge. And this is a newspaper that's getting really old, from the San Francisco Examiner. It's got a picture of our transport ship, the General Black. Black brings veterans of Korea. And the reason I tell you that is it's one of my memorable moments. It's crossing under the bridge and seeing so many of my comrades break down and cry. They were so glad to be home. And, the war was a 3-year war. We lost 35,000 GIs in that war. It was a costly war. And it was something I'll never forget. The other thing I wanted to show you is I have this is my Ike jacket. The 34th President of the United States was General Eisenhower. Well, before that, he was the Supreme Allied Commander during the Second World War. And he decided that he wanted one of these jackets. See, one of these full-length ones. And he ordered it cut off. Okay, and he wore it. It became so popular with him and his staff that all of a sudden became U.S. Army issue. And everybody got one. And I'll show you, this is a Sigmund Reese Presidential Unit Citation from the President of Korea. These are some of my awards. I'm proud of this one. Three campaign stars out of my service action. Corporal, 25th Infantry, I love it. Okay, I still am a member of the association and go to reunions in Hawaii. Yeah, these are overseas stripes. I have 2. They're 6 months each. Let's see if it fits. Would you come up? Would you come up here and help me put this thing on? I have a bad shoulder. Let's get that one in there. grown to 20, forget it. I got this when I was around 21. Look at it. You're still grown, kids. Enjoy. Thank you, young man. That was a great job. Almost this one look. One other thing I want to tell you. War has created strange things. I was trained as an infantryman, I was prepared. Luckily, I didn't have any close encounters. I often thought about that. You had to be prepared. I slept with my rifle, like all the good soldiers did, and you were always ready. And today, I'm lucky enough to be the father of 3 kids, all went to Hingham High. And I also have 6 grandchildren. And my oldest daughter married a Korean doctor. And today I have a beautiful Korean granddaughter. The only point I'm making is I was ready to kill on one hand, and now I love my family. And they're part of my family, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. So everything can happen to you during your life. Be ready for changes. Be a leader. The world needs leaders. Class of 2018, I salute you.
Thank you, Herm. Thank you, Herm. We're getting ready now, students, to move into the second phase of today's field trip, which will be talking to the veterans, looking at the exhibits. Again, all of these uniforms were worn by Hingham men and women. All of the things you see on the walls. For instance, take a good long look at some of those pictures, especially the Civil War, guys. And look at the names. And think about what street you live on, and maybe that's why they call that street. So take a good hard look. This is your history. We're here today to make that history come alive for you. You are our future. Without you to perpetuate this story and the stories that we're told today, those stories will go untold. So we don't want that to happen. This is a rich treasure here, this building in Hingham. And I'm fortunate to serve on a board of trustees with Mr. Ernie Sophus, if he could join me up here as well. Mr. Sophus was a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps during the Korean era and served in Germany from 1951 to 1953. He is our current appointed historian of this building. So if you have any questions regarding this building, and I see Scott McMillan as well. You may know him from Bear Cove Park. Scott served as a corporal in the United States Marine Corps during the Vietnam era. He is also a trustee of this building. We take pride and pleasure in talking about this building. We think this is one of Hingham's hidden gems. So we want you to enjoy yourself today. Look around. Get familiar. There's grown people that live in this town all their lives that have never been in this building. So you're very fortunate, and we want you to take advantage of that. And I would be remiss if I did not mention another classmate of yours, of Hingham High School, of all of ours. This is Corporal Christopher Orlando. This corporal went missing in January of this year in a tragic helicopter crash with 11 other Marines over the island of Hawaii. We will celebrate a memorial for him this Friday at St. Paul's Church. Hingham Square will effectively be closed, like similar to Christmas in the Square when the roads are shut, because we expect such a large turnout and contingency from the governor, the lieutenant governor, congressmen, senators, etc. So take a moment to reflect on that. This young man was 23, so very close in age to some of you now. So without further ado, I would ask that we please take your time, rise, go to the exhibits that you want to see, read about those things. Very interesting, and thanks for coming.